So we're back, and we have Jennifer Lee with us. Jennifer, how are you doing today?
Amazing. Thank you.
So Jennifer, you got quite the story here, and as the title says, you're a hostage, and we're gonna jump into that in a little bit. But what is it that you kind of do now? Take us through what it is that you do for a living now, and then we'll kind of talk back how you got into this.
Absolutely. So I am creator and host of I Need Blue podcast. As a survivor of armed robbery and abduction, I decided to create a podcast for other survivors of life events to share their stories. I partner with local, national, and international organizations to put a spotlight on what they do to help others as well. And locally, I really love that because it allows me to give back to my community. In addition, I was asked, Jen, how did you all escape? And I said, we didn't because there was 9 of us total. I said, we were rescued by law enforcement. So I sprinkle in law enforcement stories within my podcast as well, where we also discuss tough conversations like blue suicide, PTSD, things of that as well.
Was it hard to talk about being a survivor from being abducted and being held hostage when you first came out? Was this something hard to share?
The first couple of times it would trigger me a little, having to relive it. It's not something that I really talked about. It's not something that a lot of people, they knew that, my store had been robbed, but they didn't really know much after that and what it was like for me, especially being the main go-to person and having to deal with the court systems and things like that. So it was a little different at first. Now I tell my story and it doesn't, how do I put this? It doesn't have the same level of quote excitement as it does for you because I've told it so many times. But when I share it, I see like the audience, they don't move. Like they're just kind of like completely drawn into the story and everything. But yeah.
And you've done quite a few speaking engagements, and I imagine saying the same thing over and over and over again. You feel like, man, this is did this really happen? The only thing I can relate to when it comes to that is I have 2 daughters, and when my second daughter was born, I wasn't nearly as excited. So sorry, sorry, Lauren, but yeah, it's kind of like that kind of feeling, right? You
Yeah.
exhausted the excitement out of it. But yeah, it's a heck of a story when you listen to it. Now, not the 911 operator. When people think a job as a 911 operator, I think like I would just think of somebody getting a job. They're looking to get hired somewhere. Maybe they got some telemarketing experience and they're just going to answer the phone. But there's a lot more to it because as you share your story with everybody here in a few minutes, that portion of it really had a lot to do with kind of location and everything. So first off, when did this happen? How far back are we going here when this robbery took place?
So we're going back just over a year. It was April 2012. That was the day of the actual robbery. And to preface that, in February, so a couple months prior, there had been robberies going on, but they were 20 miles north of where I was located. So I had no reason to believe that they would actually come down my direction. In fact, they had stopped for a good month and a half before they resumed. And then when they resumed, they came all the way down to my store.
And they're pretty convinced it was the same person?
Yes.
Who that same person happens to still be in federal prison to this day.
Yes.
So he definitely got some time behind this. So where were you working at the time? What was your job? Like, kind of lead us up to the day.
Sure, absolutely. So I was store manager of a women's clothing store. And so prior to that, when the initial robberies had started, we did have a conference call with LP in regards to what to do if you find yourself in that situation. I remember a few things. It was don't say a whole lot, don't move fast, you don't want to startle him, and try to remember a description if you can. I remember listening and thinking, well, that was great information. I'll never need it, right? And then they did for a short while put security in all of our stores. I was part of the same district, even though I was 20 miles south, I was part of the district, so we did have security as well. During the time of the robbery, security no longer had existed in our store. Now, moving forward to the day of the robbery, it was a Saturday, 7 p.m., and my store was located in a strip center. So I had two big box stores on the end of the strip center and several stores in between. Like I said, it's Saturday. It's busy, like busiest shopping day of
What's
the
a
week.
box store for people
So, like
wondering?
Target.
Okay.
Yep, Target and Best Buy. So, your large stores on the end. And it was in an area where there was lots of hotels and things like that. So, very busy area. I am in the center of our store where our fitting rooms are located. There are 4 fitting rooms, and it's almost like a box. So when I'm in there helping customers, I can't see the front door and I can't see the registers. Probably not the best idea, but I'm not an architect. I just sell dresses. That's what I do. So I'm helping some ladies. I remember there were 4 of us. There was a mother with 2 young boys, and there was a grandmother with her 14-year-old granddaughter. And I was conversing with all of them, having a great time. I remember exactly where I was standing. I was in front of the mother and her 2 boys. And behind me, I hear, "Give me all your money." I remember I stopped and I didn't move because I'm trying to register the words I just heard because I'm used to, "Can you zip me up? Does this look good? You got shoes?" I'm in selling mode. And again, I hear, "Give me all your money."
So you didn't respond the first time.
No, I didn't. I didn't. I just stood there. So when I turn around, I have a gun pointed at me by a masked man, and the gun was close enough that I could touch it. And I kind of remember some of the words from the conference call. So I turned and I headed up towards the register.
Where was the lady with the little boys?
So once I turned, I saw him out of the corner of my eye wave the gun for the others to follow. And at that point, I know we all ended up at the register area, so they must have followed the direction as well. So we were all up there. My store had 2 cash registers. I got behind the one, and I gave him the cash. And I remember I held up the till because the coins were still in there, and I didn't know if he wanted the coins. So I did kind of like a Vanna White so as to not speak. And I did this, and I was like, "Do you want the coins?" without speaking. And he said no. And I go over to the other register, and at this point, he's taken the money, the wallets from the other customers. And I can hear crying. I can hear praying. I remember hearing, "Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." Shh. One of the customers shushed him so as to also not irritate the robber. I clean out the other register. I leave the till laying on the countertop. And he asked me if we have a safe. And I said we don't have a safe, which we didn't. And he asked about the back door that was behind us. It was a swinging door. And I said, "That goes to our back room." I was like, "I think that's where he's going to send us." And sure enough, he said, "I want you to go back there." That is the moment, and in all honesty, every time I had to go to court, recalling this part is where I would break down crying. I had what I would presume is an out-of-body experience. In that moment, I did not recognize the fact that I was a mom, that I was a sister, I was an aunt. I became the mom of these strangers, of these customers, and they were all that mattered in that moment. Their safety was all that mattered.
Real quick, so how many was it? Were you the only employee there, and everybody else was customers?
Oh, that's a great question. So there was me and one sales associate.
Okay.
And then there was 9 of us total in the store, including the 3 children. There was 1 gentleman, and the rest were women.
Wow. Okay. And
A lot of people.
yeah, just at 7 o'clock, what time do you guys close?
9 o'clock.
Wow. So there were that many people on a Saturday night.
Yes.
Do you think he planned this? Like, did you want people to be in the store? Did you get a feeling that he was happy that there was more people there? Because he was robbing you guys individually too, right?
Yes.
Jeez. Okay.
Yeah, that's a great question. And you know what I will say is as I was walking up to the register, I remember it's crazy what you remember when you're in high stress situations or what you think, right?
Right.
I remember thinking, how long had he been watching? How long had he been watching me to know that I was the one to come to? Did he come in and say, oh, she looks like she's in charge? Or had he been watching me for days, weeks, months? I don't know. The thought haunts you, you know?
Does it still haunt you to this day?
It's interesting. It doesn't necessarily haunt me, but it's a question I don't have an answer to.
Right.
Make sense?
Yeah.
So I usher everybody to go in front of me to head to the back. In that moment, if he was going to hurt somebody, I needed it to be me. I didn't want it to be me. I needed it to be me. And not that I'm a hero or anything like that. I was in this ultra protective mode that if something happened to them, it was just going to destroy me. So I needed to just be that first line of defense for them. So they head back through the through the swinging door. And he stops me and he says, "Where's your safe?" It concerned me because now I know he doesn't believe my answer when I told him that we don't have a safe.
Honestly, if I was going to rob you and you told me there was no safe, I probably wouldn't have believed it. What do you guys just make daily drops? Do you go to the bank a couple times a day and drop the cash?
Yeah, we're not that big of a volume of a store.
How much
And
cash was there?
$1,600.
Mm.
And so I told him again, I said, we don't have a safe. I'm concerned because he's asked me this again, and I was like, okay, he doesn't believe me and what I'm having to say, so that's not making him happy. But I also am recognizing that it's 7 p.m. He's been in the store for I don't know how long. He took all of our money. What more does he want? You know, the longer he's in there, I know his risk is increasing of getting caught.
What time was it now about by the time you guys got put in the room and emptied your wallets and stuff?
I get asked that question all the time, and in all honesty, time stops, and it becomes a series of events. So I can tell you what happened, but I could not tell you how long.
Wow.
How long it took.
There's no security cameras?
No, there are no cameras
My goodness.
in the stores. So we round the back door where we would take out our trash, and he asked me if it's locked, and I said yes. And if you push on it, the alarm is going to go off. Now we are in my back storage room, which if you look in the picture, that's where we were. And we're all lined up in front of my desk. And he asked me to pull the landline out of the phone. So that always dates my story a little bit.
Landline. Okay.
Yes. So I pulled,
What are those?
I know. So I pulled that out of the wall. And then he asked for all of our cell phones. And I watched the other customers relinquish their phones, and I always think to myself, our phones are so important to us. They're so personal, right? Our pictures, our emails, everything. I had my cell phone still in my pocket, in my pants pocket. We had a newly constructed room that was built in back there that was used for storage for the district, fixtures, hangers, things like that. He inquired about that room. And when he did, I knew that's where he was going to have us go next. And I also knew when I had to turn to go into that room, you would see the outline of my cell phone. So I too gave up my phone. So now in my mind, I'm thinking we have no landline, there are no cell phones, nothing. So we go in the room, and he is in there with us. He asked me a very odd question. Again, I don't know why, but the question he asked was, does the door shut? And I said, I imagine it does. I said, I've never shut it, and we never had shut it. So again, I'm giving him an answer that I'm sure he wasn't happy with.
Right.
The gun is pointed at us, and he says, don't say anything and nobody will get hurt.
I got to ask, because I know when I asked you about this last time, being brought back into this room, did you think you guys were going to make it out of this? Did that thought cross your mind? Like, is he bringing... I would wonder if he's bringing you back there to execute you.
So I think in that moment, I I don't think I thought that. I think I was in a, like I said, that out of body experience almost took part of the danger out of it so that I could protect and have a clear head and keep the emotion out of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like I didn't really think too much. I knew enough to answer his questions, to not startle him and whatnot. But I don't think I allowed myself to truly think about those types of things.
Do you think, in let's say the scenario is different, like if you were one of the shoppers at the store and somebody else was the manager, do you think that had something to do with what brought the mama bear or whatever it is, the protector out of you because you were in charge of these people? Do you think if you just been a bystander, you would have still had that same instinct, or do you think it would have been displaced onto the other person that was in that situation?
That's a great question. I am naturally a leader, and I like to be in control. So I think recognizing the danger of this situation and having to stand back and trust, blindly trust that this manager knew what they were doing. And I did recognize that. And 2 years later, I got to tell the other shoppers that were with me, thank you, because they trusted me. And I'm a stranger to them. And any of them could have reacted, could have tried to be the hero. You had children there. So many different things could have happened in this scenario, and they didn't. And I do think a lot of that is because they trusted me. So knowing that, I would like to think that if I was a bystander, I would just trust the other person as well.
Honest answer.
Yep. But I also say you really never know how you're going to react until you're in the situation.
Yeah, I imagine a lot of people, especially men. Oh, if I were there, I would have tackled them and detained them. It's different, I imagine, in the real life situation with a gun pointed at you and people's lives in danger.
Absolutely. And there was a man there as well. So many of things just could have turned out differently, and that really messed with my head afterwards. That was the toughest thing for me to deal with, was the what ifs.
What was the little kids doing? You said there was 2 little kids?
There were 2 little kids. I
Man.
remember the mom consoling them, because in this room, and he's with us, the same things are going on, the praying, the crying. It was literally sensory overload for me. But he said one more time, don't say anything and nobody will get hurt. And then at that point he goes over and he pulls the door shut. And that door never having been shut before, I remember the scraping of the wood. Like, yeah, just thinking of that sound gives me chills.
Like a brand new door that hasn't quite set yet.
Yeah, usually new construction is great, but not in that case. So yes, I remember that. So now we are all in this room, and I remember looking over to my left, and one of the ladies I was helping, the grandmother, was starting to have difficulty breathing. She was starting to have a panic attack. And I remember going over to her and basically pinning her up against the wall and looking into her beautiful brown eyes. I'll never forget those eyes. And saying to her, baby, I need you to stay with me. I need you to stay with me. I need you to breathe. And trying to get her to calm down and regulate her breathing by following what I was doing. Slowly, I can feel her body start to go down. I'm not able to hold her up. I called the gentleman over. I was like, I need your help. I was like, she's going to fall. And so he came over and we get her down on the floor. As store manager, there's lots of times I come in early, or I'm just working by myself maybe for the first hour of my day. So I'm trained to listen for the front doorbell. So if a customer comes in, I can go out there and assist right away.
Are these like the bells that are like tied to the door, and when they open they bang, or like
No,
electronic
it was
doorbell?
electronic.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So right after we get this lady on the floor, I hear the doorbell go off. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, he's gone.
Or is it another customer coming in the door?
Yeah. So I'm hoping he's gone, right? And so this lady is now on the ground, and she progresses to get worse. So now she's having a seizure.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And I know how to put on a Band-Aid, right? I don't watch ER, Grey's Anatomy. I'm not a McDreamy fan. Like, none of that works for me, right? And so she's now, the body is doing what a seizure does. And I hear the doorbell, the front doorbell again. So now I'm like, okay, at that point, somebody went out, somebody came in. To go back to what you just said, I don't know. I have no idea what's going on outside that door. My sales associate had hidden her phone in her bra, and she pulls it out, and I looked at her and I said, I need you to get behind me. I said, because I've heard the doorbell twice and I don't know who's in the store. And if
Right.
the robber comes back in and pushes that door open, I do not want him to see you on the phone. So she did. She called 911, told them what we need.
How terrified was she? When she was dialing 911, do you think she was thinking, oh my God, he's going to walk in and see me? Like, what was going through her mind at that point? Any idea?
I have to imagine probably the same things that I was. Yeah, I had her hidden behind me as best as I could, and it was a quick phone call. It was like, you got to be quick and hang up,
Right.
and turn your phone off.
Was
and
the
hide
room
it.
bright, dark? Was it like, what was the lighting in there?
It was dark. There was light coming in from underneath the door because this was an inside room. So there was no windows to like the outside.
No light switch.
No.
Okay. So you guys were sitting in the dark.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It's like a nightmare.
Yeah. And so she's getting worse. And I remember customers are kind of giving me ideas on how I should help her. But instinctually, it wasn't feeling right. Like I was nervous to do some of the things that were suggested because I was afraid of potentially harming her,
Right.
or making it worse. So I asked for my sales associate. I said, I need your phone. I'm going to call 911. At that point, I had to risk being caught to potentially save this woman's life, right? So I'm dialing 911 and I hear the doorbell again.
Ugh.
So now I have 3 doorbells. I get 911 on the phone, and I'll never forget that 911 dispatcher. I have the utmost respect for what they do. She got some information from me, which is their way of kind of getting you, the person who's in stress, to kind of get your surroundings around you and your wits around you so that then you can follow directions of what they tell you to do. And she did. The directions that she gave me helped me to assist the lady in that moment. And I remember when I was on the phone with her, the door pushes open. And for a second, I was like, oh God, we all look up and we took a big sigh of relief because it was law enforcement. And I don't think any one of us could have been more happier and relieved in that moment. For me, I was thrust into this protector mode where our police officers and our first responders, they sign up for that. They get some training for that. I don't. So I could feel the stress that I had of having to play that role kind of be released from me and let them take over.
Did they have their guns drawn?
No. And the ambulance came, so the EMTs, took care of the lady. They ushered us out of the back room. I remember all of the customers. They were in kind of the shoe department sitting down. The officers needed to get their information. And I remember the one officer, he looked at me during this, and he was like, you look relatively calm for everything that just happened. And I remember I said to him, just give me a few hours and I'm not going to be okay. I'm like, I am pushing adrenaline right now, but I really need a cigarette. So if you want to go out back with me, I'm going to smoke. And that is what I did.
Wow.
I think that was the best cigarette ever in my life. Not that I promote smoking,
Right.
but I'm going to tell you, that was crazy. So from there, I remember I had to call my district manager. I remember I called my parents. And then I just spent a lot of time trying to answer. The detective had gotten there at that point. So I worked with him a lot, trying to recall everything that happened. And then I remember looking outside the front doors and seeing that yellow police line, do not cross tape. You see that in movies.
Right.
Right?
Like crime scene tape.
Yeah. And I was like, wow, that's like at the entrance to my store, you know? And so eventually I was able to leave and I had a girlfriend pick me up. I was, at this point, my body was starting to shake. The adrenaline was subsiding and the reality of the situation was starting to set in and physically affect my body. So my girlfriend, who I worked with, picked me up. And I remember I had a margarita and beer, and I mixed all the drinks together that you should not mix together. And it wasn't a good sleeping night.
No.
No, not at all. But the next morning, I remember I kept my sunglasses on for the most part because just from the crying and the stress and the lack of sleep, my eyes looked awful. They were unrecognizable. That honestly is the
Super puffy.
best way I can describe them. And I remember feeling exhausted and just trying to absorb everything that just happened. I remember for some reason we had to go to another store to get money because, you know, in retail they want the store open as fast as they can, right? Because they're losing money. But they put me on a 10-day leave, and I spent my first week every day with detectives and law enforcement, either in the store talking about what I had seen walking through the scene or whatever it is that they needed. Within probably, I'm going to say 40 hours, it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, I guess, I get a call from the detective to say we got him. He was like, I'm so sorry to wake you up, but I figure you'd want to know. And I said, yes. I was like, thank you. And they had caught him. And one thing I realized after the robbery is on his way out, he had taken my wallet. So aside from, for me personally, my cell phone, he also had my wallet with my address.
Mm-hmm.
So he potentially knew where I lived too. So when they caught him, they did not recover any of my items. So those were still floating out there somewhere. They didn't find them in the trash, you know, outside the store right after. I remember them coming to the house with the lineup. So it's like a cardboard piece of paper. It's got like 8 photos, something like that on it. And you take your time and you look at them and you decide if one of them is the robber or maybe one, you know, they're
Because he was
not.
wearing a mask, right?
He was wearing a mask.
Like a ski mask? What kind of mask was it?
Yes. He had the eye holes and like the mouth.
Okay.
And that's all that were visible. But that was enough for me. Because he had a mustache that was distinguishable, and his eyes were such that I could see a lot of the whites of his eyeballs, and so those were a few things that were distinguishing to me in regards to that. So I was able to ID him. You flip the card over, you write your name down, things like that. So that was basically my first week. I went to therapy. That was highly recommended. So I went and did that. After 10 days, they wanted me to come back to work. It was our busiest time of year, and my store was in the top in the district. I also was credit card queen. I could get anybody to open up a credit card. So they loved.
Want to save 10% today? Open up a credit card with us?
Yeah. I'd be on my day off and I could get people to open up a credit card. It's great though. But so my therapist is like, you are not ready to go back. He's like, I strongly advise you do not go back to work. But they needed me to go back. I'm the type of individual where I have to go to the stop sign. I don't go down a road halfway, turn around, and spend the rest of my life wondering if.
Right.
So after 10 days, I went back. And it was good to see everybody. I got to the back, and I remember standing in front of my desk just looking at it and things triggering memories. I looked over at the door to the room where we had been left, and I was not going in there. There was no way, because just standing there looking at it was like light bulbs, just flashes going off. We had a conference call. And I remember my district manager, she asked me, "How are you?" And I said, "I don't think I'm okay." And she said, "Well, you need to figure it out because if you're not okay, I need to replace you."
Wow.
Yeah. And
Cold, just like that, cold.
yeah, there was no, yeah, this is our busiest time of year.
Right.
Yada yada. And I was like, okay. So I finished up conference call, and I remember I was leaving the back room. I pushed open the not sliding door, the swinging door. And on the other side of it was a gentleman who resembled the robber. And immediately one of my associates was standing there. I grabbed her arm. I looked at her, I about burst into tears. And she was like, "Are you okay?" And I said, "This is what happens to me." I said, "I don't understand. I don't understand. Why am I afraid of people?" You know? And it happened to be our security guard.
Mm,
They
poor
put
guy.
security. And I looked at him and I apologized. And I said, "I am so sorry." And he was like, "Ma'am," he was like, "Don't worry about it. It's okay. I understand." And I went back. I called my boss and I said, "I can't do it." I said, "I can't do it." And so that brought about a whole new set of feelings where my job was like my life. It was my sense of accomplishment. It was my friends, my family, my identity, everything. And I just realized the reality that I couldn't do it. It was like I failed. It was like I failed. It was like I end up in this situation that I didn't ask for. I protected people and nobody got hurt. And now I just lost my job. You know?
Mm.
It was really hard to swallow.
So you quit when you said you can't do it
I
anymore.
can't,
That was you quitting?
yeah, I wasn't really given any other option. It was
Right.
like, you have to do this or you're going to be replaced. And I couldn't do it. So the other option I was given was to be replaced.
And that was it. You
That
got
was-
replaced.
That I got replaced.
Was there any severance is probably not the right word, but
No, there was nothing. I had workman's comp for 6 months, which, gives you a little bit of money. I continued therapy. They had caught the driver, and so I ended up going to court for him, even though I had never seen him. I think they needed to see emotionally what the whole situation had done to someone
right.
to make it the case that you're an accomplice, but by you helping, this is what you did to someone, you know? And that was in front of a jury. That was my first time in front of a jury. That was very scary. But also,
Was the driver in the room?
yes. But also, what I didn't realize and I wasn't prepared for when I walked in that courtroom is the fact that he had family and friends there, people there that knew him. And now they knew me. They knew what I looked like. They would know what car I drove. They potentially could follow me home. I already had a lot of fear from the robbery in itself and from the fact that they, never recovered my license and whatnot. And now I just have a whole new level of fear for my safety. For some reason, this I could not figure out. When I first started to stay at home, which was the day after the robbery, I had someone stay with me because I had lived by myself. And that lasted for maybe a week. But for 3 weeks, I would not go in my bedroom. I'd get the few items that I needed for clothes, but I would not, I didn't want to sleep in my bed. I didn't want anything to do with that. I slept on the pull-out couch. And I don't know psychologically or emotionally why that is. I never figured it out. But it triggered something. And eventually I got comfortable enough where I could go in there again. I learned to change the way that I lived. And what I mean by that is I would take different ways home now. I became less predictable, if you will. I had 2 cats, so if I opened the door and my cats weren't there, I wouldn't go in. I would literally wait until they were at the door for me because they did not like strangers. So if there was someone in the house, they'd be hiding. The other thing I did is I took a sliver of paper, and at the bottom of the door, I would put the paper, I would close the door so the paper was down at the bottom suspended. And if I came home and that piece of paper had fallen to the ground, I wouldn't go in. It was kind of weird how it shifted so many things in me.
Do you think this opened up the like the world we live in, where we feel it's secure? We feel because there's parameters and there's rules put in place, but rules are broken every day, and now you're in this situation where this happened to you, and you were completely vulnerable. You could have been shot, and just everything in between. Do you think it carries over to now, to where you realize that there are consequences, and we can't just go along and just think everything's going to be perfect because there's laws? What did you end up doing? Did you end up finding more work in a different type of a line of work, or what? Because I know you're podcasting now, but this is a decade ago.
Right. So, number one, criminals don't follow laws.
They don't?
No. To go back to what you were just saying, yeah, criminals don't follow laws. So I ended up going back into the same line of work, but I had about a 45-minute commute. So it was longer for me, but I stayed within the women clothing store. I loved what I did, And then I ended up moving a matter of months later as well to a different home.
Did you move because of what happened?
No, the renter, her son was ready to move on and live with his college buddies.
Okay.
The house was really cool. It was a hospital in the Civil War.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I loved that house. Crazy things happened, though. I think that there were definitely ghosts living there or whatever. But it was a really cool house.
That's on our next episode.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I started writing a book about that stuff. But yeah, it was a great house. I hated to kind of leave the house, but that's
Do you ever go back to that area and drive through or drive by the store and just sit there and look at it? Is there any weird feelings to it still?
So the store no longer exists there.
Okay.
I think they've gone all online anyway, so the chain doesn't exist anymore as far as brick and mortar. And I have gone by before, and I think until really my podcast, I didn't, quote, acknowledge too much the situation. Now when I go there and I look at it, and I was like, wow, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
I talk about it, and sometimes when I'm done, I was like, okay, was that me? Did that really happen? Because you hear about this stuff on TV or you read a book about it, and you never really think that you're going to
experience it.
Absolutely. And so for those who live in the world of, oh, that'll never happen to me. I live in a great community, whatever. And I don't ever mean to scare anybody, but the reality is that it can happen to you. And you need to be aware, and really be aware is what it comes down to.
How did you end up getting into what you're doing now? Where did that happen? Was it like a moment that you understood something? Did somebody ask you to talk about it?
So honestly, it started when I was watching a lot of the news and seeing the portrayal of our law enforcement. And I realized that I have a story that depicts another side. And I was like, but what do I do with that? I never really talked about it. And I remember the day I put my hand on my refrigerator door and I was going to open it up. And it was like somebody slapped me across the head and was like, you have to do a podcast. I didn't even listen to podcasts, right? I knew I could do it at home. I knew I liked to talk. I knew I had a story to tell. So I just started to learn everything I possibly could through Facebook groups. I went on Amazon, found some equipment at home, just self-taught. I had 5 years prior of marketing advertising experience, so I knew things like business cards were a must. You got to have a website, little things like that. But it literally started with me telling my story and then reaching out through social media to see if there were other local people who had a story that they wanted to share. And the law enforcement first responders do not have to be part of your story. They just happen to be part of mine.
Right.
Right? But it's not, it doesn't have to be there.
When did this happen? When did this take place? When did you start the podcast?
I started, I bought my equipment April 1st of last year.
Okay, so 2021.
Yep.
So literally a decade later.
Yes.
this event still had
Yes.
still wasn't the event wasn't finished yet, and still not, obviously.
Right.
Let's Shelly, let's hop over to so on your website over here. These are your episodes, but you've told your story quite a few times as well, right?
I have. I've been on, I don't know, 7 other podcasts or radio shows. Absolutely. Yep. So those are guest appearances that I've been on.
Is there any of them that stick out that you remember the most?
Uh, I really enjoyed what was That Like podcast, which is hosted by Scott.
Jo-
And Scott Johnson, yes, you know him as well. I really appreciate Scott because number one, he became my mentor. I have found the podcast community as a whole are very open to number one, accepting of messages because we all believe in having a message and having the right to share it, whether we agree with it or not. So I found that to be awesome. But number two, there are some people like Scott who have been doing this for years, are amazing. And whenever I would email him and ask him a question, the detail I would get back, like he really took the time to answer my question and help me. And this was in the very beginning. He was one of the first podcasts that I was on. And even now today, I just emailed him the other day with a question. And yep, I think it's amazing. And I do my best to give back to people I meet in the community who want to have a podcast. You know, like what equipment do I get? So I just tell them the equipment I started out with, which was more than sufficient. And any way I can help give back as well. So I love the podcast community as a whole. Has that kind of been your feeling too?
Yeah, but I'm still brand new to the podcasting. Mine's been more of like YouTubing and stuff. But yeah, I feel like sometimes you think if you ask people something that they don't want to share this information because it's going to saturate the market, but it really is such a vast market. And with your stuff, because you basically hunt down survivors. And do you feel that sharing your story, do you feel that it empowers other people that something happened to them and they feel like they were all alone, and then they saw your story and like, oh my God, like she shared this traumatic experience. I can share mine too. How many people have come on your podcast where it was their first time sharing whatever issue they had where they opened up?
I think I've had probably about 5, and that includes some that are coming up
Okay.
that have not shared on a podcast. Maybe they talked about it. Well, I have some that hadn't talked about it at all, actually. But I love what you just said. And the thing is, yes, the fact that I have a lived experience does allow for some credibility, but also relatability in regards to the emotions that someone goes through, no matter the circumstances of the situation. The stories are obviously not just robbery. I like to talk about the things people don't want to talk about. I talk about domestic violence. I have a female survivor as well as a male survivor. We talk about human trafficking. We talk about the drug epidemic, a mother who lost her son to overdose. And on the flip side, a man who's in recovery. Foster care. We talk about the foster care system, which is broken. I have a rape survivor. She survived a serial rapist, and her courage is amazing. And what was really special and sticks out with that episode is her husband and daughter joined in on the conversation.
Oh, wow.
Yes, because when we go through these events, it doesn't just affect the survivor, it affects their family, their communities, all different types of things. And I really appreciate and encourage collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun to do the collaborations, but the connections you make from it, you never know. Like, I'm not even sure if we found each other through Instagram, but you just happen to be local, which is pretty cool. How do you feel things have like changed from, because let's say this guy stalked you out, right? Or he stalked out your store and watched it for a couple days and wanted to wait till there's a few people in there so he could go in there and make his money. It's funny enough, and I didn't even think about this till I was sitting here with you, but yesterday when we had to drive over to Orlando to pick up podcast gear, and while I was waiting, there was a security guard in there, and I was overhearing his conversation. He was talking to one of the guys that works there, and he's like, "Hey, I was at this concert last night, and one of my buddies that he stores all the equipment, like he drives the van that they put all of the concert equipment in. He said when he was leaving, when he was getting down the road, his iPhone alerted him that there was an AirTag on his car." So he goes and he looks around, he finds this AirTag on his car, and immediately he's like, "Oh my God, this person was going to follow me and rob me for everything that I have." It's like what you went through with now they have new means and new technology to get you. Could you imagine if, like the bank drops, you guys don't have a safe, you drive, if this guy pulled up on you in the car and you hesitated or whatever, do you think there's, as a woman survivor versus a male survivor, I'm sure both can be completely terrifying, but do you feel that that you have more of an obligation to like empower women to help them guard themselves? Because everybody thinks they're safe, and we're really not. So what advice would you have for somebody that's in a position where, just because there's nobody following them, how does somebody stay safe in today's day and age?
So that's a great question. And in all honesty, what's interesting is talking about where I've been guests. The last place I was a guest on was seniorlivingguide.com podcast, where we discuss situational awareness, because I was at a conference Memorial Weekend where I truly believe I was being followed at this conference and ended up in a very scary situation with this man. And if I didn't have quick thinking, maybe luck too, I could be in a very different place today, not knowing what his true intentions were. And I can share that story, or we can do a whole nother episode on that, but it absolutely addresses the question you just asked me. A couple of things that I learned is, say, for example, if you're out and about, you're at the grocery store, you're checking out, there are people around, like you don't want to ever make it known that you are by yourself, like you're living by yourself. Say, for example, Becky, she's the serial rapist story. She had gone to a store, was talking to the lady, said, "Oh, my college roommates are gone. I'm so excited. I have the house to myself." Well, this guy overheard, followed her home, and waited.
That's how he found her, was
That's
from
how
that
he
moment of
found
conversation.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And it gives me chills.
Oof.
Yes. The AirTag, that's a very scary thing. Get a VPN. I'm working on that right now. I just realized through Mike, he does global security. He's become a friend of mine, and we're going to start doing some talks together. But I had no idea that my iPhone had a Find My Phone app that came included with it, and it tells you what other devices are hooked up to your iPhone. So that's where you would see if there was an AirTag. But I'm pretty sure the Apple now put in the your friend,
Yeah.
the guy that you overheard the conversation, it kind of came up on his phone. But yeah, that's what they do. The AirTags they were designed to protect if you lose your wallet, your phone, your briefcase, whatever.
Your kid.
Your kid, yes. But there are always those that are going to take it and use it for evil.
Yep.
And so you always have to constantly be aware. Another thing that I realized was at this conference, one of the things that we did is we took a picture together, and he tagged me on his Instagram. We teach our children stranger danger, right? Don't talk to strangers. You don't get in the car. You don't give them your address. But we are quick to give out our social media information and not think about it. So the one thing, because I now speak about this experience as well, is just be aware of what you are putting on social media. Be aware of what is in the background of your pictures. All of that is clues as to where you are, what you're doing. Sometimes if I do an event today, I might post my pictures tomorrow.
Right.
So it doesn't create a pattern and things like that. So that's another way of being aware.
Shelly worked in retail for a long time, like doing hair and stuff. Did you ever have any incidents where you were in the hair salons and felt like, wow, something could go bad right now?
Yeah, a lot of times people go to lunch, they'll step out for lunch, and you're there by yourself and people come in, and it was a guy's salon, and they would be like, oh, you're here alone? And you have to pretend someone's in the back eating lunch. Or they'll be crude and sexual and be like, oh, how much for the manscaping?
Ugh.
And it's just like, you got to find ways to laugh it off without being offensive, just so they'll shut up. But yeah.
Hearing Jen's story, does it make you think like, man, like this could happen to me so easily?
Yeah, it does. And you even say it all the time. I'm like, don't take a video outside. It has our house number. I'll do stuff like that all the time. And you think I'm being crazy, but see?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So social media, it's almost like a roadmap to your identity. It's like giving it away. You're right. So everybody will drop their, and that everybody was exchanging, and, it seemed like there were quite a few creeps in the bunch, especially once the liquor got flowing.
Yeah, see, I avoided that. I didn't go to any parties.
You didn't have the bracelet?
Nope, I didn't. Nope, no parties for me. And also, the one thing I did is I was able to find two podcasters. The one I met for coffee here, she's a lady. And then the other gentleman we met through a mutual connection. So I went kind of already knowing two people versus just being this female traveling by herself in a conference, not knowing anybody. So I kind of already took precautions. That's not always possible. But I think because of the robbery, I live in a slightly different world of anything can happen.
The false sense of security bubble kind of popped for you, so like it's
Yes.
not as safe as we pretend for it to be. So you speak now. You go around, you speaking. What's the main focus of the conversation, of the message that you're speaking about? Is it about the robbery, or is it about the dynamic of the aspects of what it did to you?
It's really about overcoming what it did to me and about how we can find our strength and our resilience, and we can take something awful that we have been through and use it to help others. And also, talking about it has made dealing with it easier. And that's what I love about my podcast is it gives a platform for people to talk, and that becomes part of their healing process. Some just want to talk about it because they know that when somebody hears it that can relate, it'll help them, and that helps them.
So would you say, if you had to sum it all up, if you could go back and undo it, would you have the robbery not happen, or do you feel like there's no way you'd be where you are today if it hadn't happened?
Oh, I definitely wouldn't be where I am today if it didn't happen. Public speaking, no, not for me. But I have this message, so I force myself to get up there and do it. But again, it's the fact that I have this lived experience that makes me relatable. So if I didn't have that, it probably would be much tougher for me to get people to even stop and say, "Oh,
Yeah,
wow."
like, who are you? You're giving me
Yeah.
advice. You've never been through this.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So, because truly in my heart, this is my passion, and I really feel like I am fulfilling my purpose now, I wouldn't change anything.
So he came in around 7.
Uh-huh.
What time did the cops get there? Is that like documented on a police report or something?
I'm sure that it has to be. I have not seen any police reports.
Okay.
In all honesty, I haven't seen anything. I never wanted to
Okay.
be honest with you. I never investigated that. I will say that they caught the robber. He was a prior felon. So I didn't have to go to court for him or anything like that. But I did get a phone call 2 years later. The robber was appealing, and so I was being summoned to federal court, which goes back to what you said. He is in federal court. And that is a completely different beast. I remember when I got the phone call from the lady saying, we need you to come in, I just cried. I was like, I don't want to. And she was like, I'm sorry, you're going to have to. And it was about an hour and a half drive to get to the courthouse. And I remember I got there, and it was a table longer than this one, actually. And all of us were reunited in that moment.
All survivors from the robbery?
Yep, we were all forced to come and testify. And what I appreciate about that moment is I was able to look at them and say, thank you. Thank you for trusting me. Because like we talked about earlier, one of them could have tried to be a hero. There are so many things that could have went on. So to have the opportunity to just truly thank them meant the world to me. But other than that, it was not fun. I remember they wanted to reimburse us for mileage or whatever, and the lady looked at me to get information, and I just cried. I just put my head down, and I was like, I just want you to leave me alone. Like, that's all I want. Just, I don't want your money. I don't want nothing. And I ended up, I had to testify 2 times. So one day, must have been the end of the day, and then I had to come back the next morning and testify. And it was really hard because when I first started, they tried to tear apart my character, and make it seem like I was prejudiced because he was a black man and I'm a white woman. And so I struggled with that, but they shut that down, because I wasn't
Right.
prejudiced. My
You,
sales
you
was
pointed a gun
decent.
at your face and say, "Get in a room."
Yeah. So no, that was it. It was the first time though that I had ever had anybody question that, about me, because everybody knows me and
Right.
knew that wasn't true. But that was, again, I remember they brought me water, they brought me Kleenex, and by the time I was done, the Kleenex was this rolled up ball disintegrating in my hand from all of the tears. It was really hard, but, in speaking with other survivors of violent crime, some of them, they weren't caught. So the survivor has to live with the fact that the perpetrator is still out there,
Right.
maybe hurting other people.
Or going to show back up at your house.
Yes. Where for me, he was caught because they pinged my phone. I had the Where's My Droid app.
Oh, I was going to ask you that. So it was
Yes.
it was your phone.
It was my phone.
So just to recap, so he took everybody's phone except for the one person that kept it hidden. That person that didn't give their phone up, when he asked them for their phone, they were just like, "I don't have a phone,"
I don't know.
or he just was kind of spacing it and he wasn't organized enough, maybe.
Yeah.
So he had yours, he kept yours.
He kept mine, and yes, I remember just like this light bulb went off as I was talking to the cops, and I was like, "Oh, I have the app. Where's My Droid?" And so they pinged it, and that's where they found him. He was at a bar, living it up, drugs, alcohol with his buddies. And for $1,600, he is now in the state penitentiary.
Federal.
Federal.
Yeah.
Federal, yes.
I think we saw that his release date wasn't until like 10 years from now ish.
Yeah.
Crazy thought. So let's say, you're doing this podcast, right? And your whole mission is to share your story in hopes to get other stories to bring out the awareness. What if this guy ever reached out to you in the future? Because obviously, you'd be easy to find if he was curious, and he saw you're doing this podcast and he sent you like an apology letter. Would you ever invite him on your podcast if he was willing to come on and talk about what he did, why he did it, and his level of remorse? Would you ever be willing? I mean, I don't know if that question's ever been asked, but man, what a wild series that would be.
No, and you and I think as I was leaving our first meeting,
Yes.
you had said that, and we didn't talk about it, but I left with that thought in my mind, and that thought has been in my mind ever since you had mentioned it, and I haven't come up with a definitive answer. There's the part of me that I believe that we forgive. Because I don't hate him. I mean, again, that whole situation brought me to where I am today, so I am thankful. I think it would bring about a new level of triggers for me, that I would have to be ready to deal with. And I think that would just take me a little bit of time to process.
Right.
But I think as a content creator, I think it would be fascinating to explore that and to hear what he has to say. And we believe in giving people a voice. So I'm sure at the end of the day, after I get myself ready, because me and my well-being comes first, then I think that I would give him that opportunity. Whew, like that's wanting to make me cry now because it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming to me to really even process the thought. Yeah. I don't
High
know.
five.
Yeah.
Wow, making me cry over here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, because we talked about to moving on from how whatever trauma, they say part of it is like forgiveness.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm crying.
Well, I don't know either, but it's okay.
But yeah, no, these, and that's why I told you I didn't want to talk too much about it when we were first speaking, because the questions when they come up, it's just, it's such a relatable story, especially when you pick it apart, when you take away, it's not just you were robbed in this moment. Oh, she was just robbed. It's not like she was raped or beaten. It's all of the other things that have happened, and the triggers, and the not being able to go home by yourself. Now you take zigzags and wear Groucho mustaches to appointments. You've had to kind of change the way that you do things in order for you to feel a level of comfort to be able to be in society without hiding in your room. Have you had any people come on your show that have been through something traumatizing, but they weren't really able to move on to where they just kind of reclused into their house and they lived in the shadows until they started to talk about it?
No, I think let me just say, I think that we're crying like I didn't expect that. It was coming. I could feel it coming. But we're human. We're human and we care about people. And I think that that's why we are crying. And I think that that's okay. I have never had anybody on my podcast that has not been able to. Well, let me take that back. So, I have a mom who's local, whose son died of overdose, and for 3 months she couldn't get out of bed. He passed away in Washington State. His addiction initially started here, but they sent him to his dad's house thinking a new location he would be better, but that's not how it worked out. But for her, she didn't get out of bed for 3 months. But now she's become an advocate. She worked to pass Ricky's Law in Washington State and King County. She has a private Facebook group for local moms who have lost their children. And we're also collaborating with another nonprofit, the Blue Plaid Society, to also bring about awareness in different ways of the fentanyl poisoning as well as the drug overdose epidemic. So she is someone who has come a long way. And I know on the anniversary of her son's death, it's a tough time for her. So
Do you think the community has helped her?
Yeah, wow. Absolutely. She's on the board, I believe, of Space Coast Recovery as well.
Oh, she's here.
Yeah, she's local.
Oh, okay.
She's local. So it's, we go through things. And I think for those who can just find the other side, that is so healing. And even if the other side is talking, if you're still in your home, then there's something holding you back from talking about it or facing it. And I would never force anybody to do that. I have had episodes where I had a conversation with them, so I kind of already knew their story. We connected well on the phone. But then when it came time to record, they weren't ready. They couldn't do it. And that is okay. Not to mention when you record it, there's a different level of like scariness that goes along with it versus just talking to somebody over the phone. And I completely get that.
It goes out there in the ether for everybody to see and hear.
Yes. And so I have encountered that, and I am absolutely okay with that. The door is open. I was like, the door is open for you whenever you are ready, if you are ready. In the meantime, if you need anything, you have my cell phone number. Just call me.
And how do most people find you on because I know you have Instagram, Facebook, and your website. So over on Facebook, what do most people contact you through? Facebook, Instagram? How do you really get out there in front of people?
Honestly, people are finding me now and through referrals. So I am so involved in the community and different organizations that now people are finding me. Either a friend knows me and is like, hey, you need to call Jen. She's got this podcast, yada, yada. So for me, I have national guests. Obviously, podcasts are national. but I decided to really hit this grassroots. And so for me recently, that's where all of my guests have come from.
Do so on your website, which we were just showing over here, ineedblue.net, you list all of your episodes there?
Absolutely. On the first page, all of my episodes are there. But I am on all of your favorite podcast platforms. I think there's like 20 of them.
Do you prefer people listen to it? Let's just be honest here. What's more beneficial to you, if they listen to it from your website or if they do it through one of the Apple or Stitcher or whatever the different places are?
Well, whenever you send someone to your website, then they get a ton more information there as well. Plus, I offer sponsorships if you want to sponsor and advertise things like that. So it is a little more beneficial, hopefully, to me if you go to the website. I enjoy Apple Podcasts and Spotify because that is where I get my analytics.
Okay.
Where from my website I don't, but Apple Podcasts, I can see my followers, I can see consumption, how much of an episode people are listening to. So I enjoy that because I'm a numbers type of person, so
Right.
I like to dissect that. But at the end of the day, if you're getting the message somewhere, that's what's most important.
Man, congratulations on everything you overcame with this and taking such a horrible situation and turning it in not just a career, but giving back to such a large community of people that are struggling. So, guys, all of social media links, everything for Jennifer will be in the bio of this. So go check her out. She's got some amazing episodes out there, and listen to hers on with Scott Johnson on What Was That Like with Scott Johnson. He did a great job interviewing you. So I'm a fan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.